welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Shivani Singh. Fear is a highly marketable commodity, especially when it arrives via viral WhatsApp forward or a nicely produced social media video, warning you that the fuel you just pumped into your car this morning is eating your engine from the inside out. For the past few weeks, a massive public backlash has been brewing over India's E20 fuel transition, fuel blended with 20% ethanol. Panic-mongering claims that suggest that this is a rushed, untested experiment forced onto unsuspecting motorists. But today, the top minds of India's automotive and energy sectors did something rare. They stepped out of their laps, held a massive joint press conference briefing, and decided to answer the hysteria with a hard, cold, peer-reviewed science. And the timing couldn't be more profound. Just today, speaking in Rajasthan at the inauguration of the long-awaited Panch Pardra refinery complex, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a massive declaration. He asserted that modern India had successfully neutralized and overcome what he called the biggest energy crisis of the 21st century, triggered by the volatile West Asia war. Consider the scale of that claim. When conflict flared in West Asia, threatened closures of the critical Strait of Hormuz could have choked India's energy lifeline. India's imports nearly 60% of its LPG and the vast majority of its crude. Yet while global economies buckled under historic energy shortages, India didn't just survive, it emerged as a winner. Indian diplomacy expanded sourcing to 40 different countries, and state oil companies absorbed a staggering 75,000 crore rupees in global market shocks to ensure your domestic fuel supply stayed completely uninterrupted. But insulation from global shocks requires structural self-reliance. You cannot be completely sovereign if your economy is entirely hostage to oil rigs in turbulent waters. This is exactly where the domestic biofuel push fits in. Ethanol blending isn't a whimsical side project that India is actually undertaking. It is a core pillar of India's strategic energy security. So why does the sudden panic take place? Well, let's strip away the noise and let's look at the facts. At today's high-stakes press conference that was taking place, industry titans, including former Engineers India Limited Chief Vartika Shukla, representatives from the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers and the Automotive Research Association of India came armed with decades of data. Their unified message was unambiguous. India's E20 rollout was not an overnight political diktat. It is a highly measured, step-by-step, scientifically driven process that has been under development for years. Let's contextualize the entire timeline for those claiming that this was done in a rush. In 2014, India's ethanol blending stood at a negligible 1.5%. By December 2025, India achieved its historic 20% blending target, 5 full years ahead of the original schedule. Now, this isn't an experimental phase. The experts revealed today that they analyzed crores of service and real-world vehicle data points. And the verdict? Well, there is absolutely zero evidence of elevated engine failures rates or unusual mechanical degradation in vehicles running on E20 compared to older fuels. To put the final nail in the coffin of the untested fuel narrative, the panel pointed out that E20 is already standard global practice. The United States, Brazil, Canada, Thailand, and several European nations have run on high-threshold ethanol blends for decades. Brazil routinely, in fact, uses blends exceeding 25%, and their cars aren't dropping dead on the highways. Well, to systematically dismantle the viral myths, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has officially issued a comprehensive 10-point clarification. Let's break down the most aggressive rumors versus what science actually says. Myth 1 is that E20 destroys vehicle engines and corrodes the components. But what's the fact? The fact, the ARAI alongside Indian Oil and the Indian Institute of Petroleum have conducted grueling long-term testing. They ran passenger cars for over 40,000 kilometers and two-wheelers for 20,000 kilometers on E20. The results showed no compatibility issues with metal or plastic engine components. What's the second myth? That the older vehicles' engines will actually suffer catastrophic failure. Well, the fact is that automakers have built massive engineering safety margins into modern vehicles. For pre 2023 cars, the only slight variation is that certain rubber parts might require slightly earlier routine replacement during standard servicing. No engine failure, no catastrophic damage. Well, myth 3 is using E20 actually voids my vehicle's warranty and car insurance. Well, the fact is that the government has explicitly synchronized this with manufacturers and insurers. If your vehicle is certified or approved for E20, your warranty and insurance terms remain completely intact. Let's look at myth number 4, where ethanol production consumes a criminal 10,000 liters of water per liter of fuel. Well, the fact is that this was a massive social media talking point, and it is entirely false. The ministry has clarified that modern distilleries consume a mere 3 to 5 liters of processed water per liter of ethanol. Furthermore, these plants operate under strict zero liquid discharge regulations, meaning that water is continuously recycled. Let's look at myth number 5, that it diverts food grains and threatens India's food security. Well, the fact is that food security remains strictly protected. Only surplus rice cleared explicitly after fulfilling national buffer stock requirements is actually repurposed. More importantly, maize now accounts for over 40% of the ethanol feedstock. Maize requires far less water to grow than paddy, and farmers are now incentivized to cultivate it through higher minimum support prices. Let's look at myth number 6. The government has admitted to the Supreme Court that E20 is just an experiment. The fact is that it's a classic case of misreporting. The Office of the Attorney General cleared the air. The legal battle before the apex court was strictly about contractual procurement disputes between suppliers and not the scientific validity of the fuel itself. Myth number 7 is that E20 causes water to seep into and accumulate into the fuel tank. Well, the fact is that both modern automotive fuel systems and retail petrol pump infrastructures are heavily engineered with state-of-the-art safeguards specifically to prevent water ingress. Let's look at myth number 8, where ants and bees are swarming vehicle tanks because ethanol contains sugar. Well, this one actually belongs in a comedy sketch. Fuel-grade ethanol undergoes intense industrial distillation. There is zero residual sugar left in the fuel. Furthermore, it contains specialized chemical material which are designed specifically to repel insects, while the heavy hydrocarbon smell of petrol easily overpowers anything else. Let's look at myth number 9. The program ignores environmental regulations. Well, the fact is that every single ethanol plant requires mandatory statutory environmental clearances and rigid groundwater monitoring and absolute compliance with environmental watchdogs. Let's look at myth number 10, where E20 severely compromises your vehicle's mileage. Well, the fact is that the government and testing agencies openly admit that there is a minor energy density difference. However, extensive field trials show that the drop in fuel efficiency is entirely marginal and heavily outweighed by the macroeconomic benefits. And those macroeconomic benefits are difficult to argue with. Look at the numbers released today. Since its inception, the ethanol blending program has saved India more than 1.9 lakh crore rupees in precious foreign currency. It has pumped over 1.6 lakh crore rupees directly into the rural economy, paving out Indian farmers for their crops. Environmentally, it has displaced 310 lakh metric tons of crude imports and slashed carbon dioxide emissions by a massive 930 lakh metric tons. Well, when global energy supply chains are fractured by war, a nation has two options. It can either remain vulnerable to the geopolitical whims of the West and the Middle East, or it can engineer its way out. India chose to engineer its way out. The transition to E20 is a massive multi industry pivot. Is it flawless? No. Structural transformation of this scale is without minor teething issues. But to label a deeply researched, decade long scientific rollout as a reckless experiment is a disservice to the data. The next time a viral video tells you that your car engine is melting because of a sugarcane byproduct, remember to look past the panic, look at the science, and follow the data. Thank you for watching.